You could step over this line without lifting your knee. A row of rocks, ankle high, a few sharpened stakes leaning at bad angles. There is blood dried on the stones, and two men are screaming at each other across a gap you could cross in one step. Neither of them moves. Why not? Behind one of them, a fire is still burning. Behind the other, somebody has tied a scrap of fur to a pole. That scrap is a flag. Those rocks are a border. And for 300,000 years before this moment, no human being on Earth had either one. So how did ancient humans invent countries? No passport, no anthem, no line on a map, no word for the place you were from. You walked in any direction until your legs quit, and the ground never once told you that you did not belong. Watch the rocks because the rocks are about to lie to you. The wall is the least important object in that picture, so is the blood. The scrap of fur on the pole is doing the real work, and by the end of this, you will know why. For almost all of our existence, you lived with about 30 people, and you knew every single one of them by smell. Psychologist Robin Dunbar put a ceiling on that. Around 150. That is roughly how many people your brain can hold as real individuals, with names and debts and grudges attached to them. Under that ceiling, you do not need a government. You need gossip, and you need one more thing, which is the most underrated invention in human history: ridicule. Among foragers in the Kalahari, a hunter who drags home a huge animal is not congratulated. He is insulted. People walk out, look at the carcass, and tell him it is a bag of bones. They ask why he made them walk this far for scraps. He is expected to agree with them and call his own kill worthless. This is deliberate. A man who gets praised starts to think he is in charge. A man in charge starts telling people what to do, so the camp mocks the ambition out of him before it can grow. For thousands of generations, that worked. There were no kings, because kings got laughed back down into the group. Then people stopped walking, and the reason had nothing to do with food. 12,000 years ago, in a river valley, people built round houses out of stone and sank the floors below ground level. They had grinding slabs worn into deep bowls. They had flint sickles with a shine polished onto the blade from cutting grass thousands of times in the same motion. And they had no farms. That detail breaks the story everyone tells. Farming did not make people settle down. People settled down first, sat on the same hill for centuries, and worked out agriculture afterwards. They also started putting their dead under the floor, not out in the landscape, under the room where they slept. In one of those villages, an elderly person was buried with a hand resting on a puppy. That hand did not fall there. Somebody lifted it, set it on the animal, and closed the grave over both of them. I would give a lot to have watched them do it. Once your grandmother is under your floor, that patch of ground stops being dirt. You will not walk away from it in a bad year. You cannot. She is in it. The first border markers on this planet were not fences. They were graves. But a grave only ties you to your cousins. It does nothing about the stranger on the next hill. On a hill, somebody raised rings of T-shaped limestone pillars, some of them 16 feet tall and weighing 10 tons. Carved into the stone, foxes, scorpions, snakes, boars, and vultures with their wings spread open. People lived up there. There are houses and cisterns cut into the rock to hold rainwater through the dry months. Nobody up there was farming. The people who quarried, carved, dragged, and stood up those pillars had no wheel, no metal, no draft animals, and no crops. They were hunter-gatherers, and they came from across the region to build it. The hill is older than the first planted field anywhere near it. Around the pillars, mountains of gazelle bone from feasts that fed hundreds. Think about the scale of that for a second. Rival bands hauling 10-ton stones uphill for a project none of them would live to finish. No payroll, no boss with a whip, just something they all believed hard enough to show up for. That is the trick that beats the 150 ceiling. You cannot know 10,000 people. You can believe the same thing as 10,000 people. Every one of them becomes slightly less likely to kill you. Every country that has ever existed runs on that exact technology. A story strangers agree to tell each other. Belief gets people to show up for it. It does not feed them, and it cannot be counted. Which brings us to the strangest fact about states. They grow on wheat and barley, and almost never on anything else. Not yams, not cassava, not potatoes. There is a reason, and it is not nutrition. A yam sits underground. It does not ripen on a schedule. You can leave it in the dirt for months and dig up exactly what you need for dinner. Walk past a yam field and you have no idea how much food is in it. Wheat stands up in the open, it ripens all at once, inside a window of about 2 weeks, and if you miss that window, you lose the year. It has to be cut, threshed, and piled in one place. Anybody with eyes can size up the harvest from the edge of the field. Anybody with a bowl can measure it. You cannot tax a yam. The first states were not built around the best crop. They were built around the most countable one. Now picture yourself standing on that pile. Enough food to carry hundreds of people through winter, sitting in one spot, visible from a mile away. You are going to need a wall. At Jericho, somebody built one. Stone. Thick. running around the whole settlement with a tower attached. The tower is 28 feet of stacked stone with a staircase built inside it, 22 steps cut and fitted by people who had no metal tools. Someone has costed out the labor at roughly 11,000 days of work. That is not a family project. Somebody planned it, somebody assigned it, and somebody fed those workers every single day while they carried rock instead of finding food. Run those numbers as a modern build. 30 people clocking in every day for a year, no wages, with a full-time kitchen behind them. Whatever else that wall was, it was administration. Archaeologists still argue about the purpose. Flood barrier maybe, enemies maybe, but early farming towns had a problem nobody expected. They leaked. Farming meant longer hours, worse teeth, shorter lives, and a permanent tax bill, and people noticed. Given the option, plenty of them walked out and went back to hunting. Some of the oldest walls in the world make just as much sense facing inward as facing outward. You do not build 22 stone steps to keep out a leopard. You build them to see who is leaving. Everything so far points to one shape: grain, wall, boss, crown. Then you look at the Indus Valley and the shape falls apart. Along those rivers, a civilization spread over an area bigger than ancient Egypt. Cities on a grid, drains running under the streets, bathrooms. Their bricks were made to one fixed ratio, 1:2:4, and that ratio holds across sites 600 miles apart. Their weights are little cubes of polished stone. A cube from one city balances a cube from a city 2 weeks of walking away. A building code, enforced across an empire by nobody we can identify. Because there is no palace, no royal tomb packed with gold, no giant carved face of a ruler, no wall showing an army trampling anybody. Every other early state left us a statue of the man in charge. This one left us a set of weights. I do not know what to do with that, and honestly nobody else does either. Their writing survives on thousands of tiny seals, and no one has ever read a word of it. So a country can be held together by agreeing what a brick is. Everywhere else, it took paperwork. A town on a southern floodplain called Uruk grew until tens of thousands of people were living inside it, 5,000 years ago. You cannot run that on gossip. Long before the city, people were keeping accounts with little clay tokens. A cone for one measure of grain, a sphere for a bigger one, different shapes for sheep, oil, jars, cloth. To lock in a deal, you sealed the tokens inside a hollow ball of wet clay. Shake it, and you can hear your own contract rattling around in there. The problem is obvious. To check the number, you have to smash the container. So they started pressing the tokens into the outside of the ball before sealing them in. Now the marks on the surface told you what was inside. And then somebody noticed you do not need what is inside at all. That is writing. Not poetry, not prayer. A workaround invented by a man who did not want to break a clay ball. The oldest tablets from that city are overwhelmingly accounts. Barley, beer, oil, sheep, worker rations. Who received what? Our species could have written anything down first. We wrote an invoice. Next to those tablets, thousands of identical crude clay bowls, pressed in molds, used once and thrown out like paper cups. The same bowl, the same portion, every day. That is not dinner, that is payroll. 4,500 years ago, two cities on that same floodplain went to war over a strip of farmland between them. A king from a third city was called in to settle it. He walked the ground, marked the line, and planted a carved stone in the dirt. That stone is the oldest border on Earth that we can actually read. The text on it is not a description. It is a legal document with a curse attached. Move this stone, cross this line, and named gods come for you personally. It did not hold. The neighbors tore the stone out of the ground, burned it, cut a canal across the strip, and took the fields. What came back was worse. There is a carved slab from the winning side. On it, soldiers walk in a solid block, shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping, spears out. They march over the bodies of the men who used to farm that land. Above their heads, vultures fly away with human arms hanging out of their beaks. The monument does not celebrate a hero. It celebrates a rectangle of infantry and a redrawn boundary. You have walked past the same monument. Yours is bronze, in a park, with a man on a horse on top, and you have never read the plaque. Everything you recognize as a country is sitting on that slab. A surveyed line, a written claim, a god called in as witness, an army in formation, and a pile of people who disagreed. The rocks in the field came first. The paperwork is what made them permanent. After that, the pattern spreads fast. One king in Egypt puts on 2 crowns at once, and 2 lands become one country on a single piece of carved stone. But those are kings and their tax bases. Nobody inside them woke up feeling like a nation. That feeling is shockingly recent, and it needed the flag. You will never meet almost anybody in your country. No shared meal, no bloodline, no ancestor in the same ground. You disagree with most of them about most things, and you still feel that you and they are the same kind of person. That had to be manufactured. Printed languages, schools, songs, one story hammered into millions of heads until it felt like a fact of nature. When Italy became a country, most of the people inside the new border could not understand each other's speech. The country arrived first. The Italians were assembled afterwards, and some borders were drawn by men who had never stood on them. Two European officials sat with a map of the Middle East and pulled a line across the desert with a ruler. That line is still there. People are still dying on it. Most people assume the passport is as old as the border it sits inside. It is not. Yours is about 100 years old. Across most of Western Europe, before the First World War, you could cross a border carrying nothing but money. A few states still asked for papers, most did not. No booklet, no photograph, no stamp, no queue. The war put the checkpoints up as a temporary wartime measure, and they were never taken down. Your country feels older than the mountains. It is younger than your great-grandmother. Tonight you will fall asleep inside a line that somebody drew. The wall is gone. The blood dried a very long time ago. The scrap of fur on the pole is still up. Thanks for watching. All the sources and studies used in this video can be found in the description below.